Over the past few years, I've made videos about internet horror topics about every Halloween since I grew up a lot on internet horror. One of the interesting facets of this medium is the way it utilizes technology in an interesting way.
So is it any wonder people are afraid of technology?
Technology!
Because, as technology continues to grow and evolve, the way technology is used in horror changes, but not in the way that grows with it. Rather, it seems to appreciate older technology in this new way. There's obviously times when the internet does use new technology that comes out to make horror stories, like with cursed emails that brought up stories like Small Dog EXE, but overall people tend to look back at older technology as a way to feel creeped out. This video will explore this and the multiple of creative ways people have utilized technology in internet horror. Analog horror. I brought up analog horror here and there, but I've never really went in depth with that niche because of how many people tend to make fun of it and how hard it was for me to really get into it. I've tried, but my main problem with analog horror is its pacing and oversaturation. I have enjoyed my fair share of analog horror, but for every Local 58 in Walton Files, we get ourselves an urban spook. It takes a lot of talent to make a good analog horror series, but because of its low ceiling of accessibility, it ends up leading to a lot of the same thing being created, analog horror series just being too long for me to really want to keep up with, and some of the scares being lazily created or just so ridiculous that they end up becoming memes. However, the concept itself is just incredibly intriguing, and there are so many great series out there that perfectly utilize that older technology in a way that makes it nostalgic and unnerving at the same time. Analog horror's interesting use of its technology creates tons of potential for unique storytelling and truly insane scares that go hard in visual and audio design. These uses of older technology are usually used as a way to easily manipulate imagery to be more disturbing and captivating, or to capture a specific era of time or tone perfectly. So many different ways of using old technology to create a story, like a news program that slowly turns into something that subverts your expectations of what's usually told in them, to a presentation giving you information about some cosmic horror like it's something completely normal, to an old game that is haunted and you being able to tell it because of spooky shit like this happening. Sound design especially is such an important detail to what can make and break an analog horror, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll save my full thoughts on what I think makes analog horror work for like a future video or something. It's very interesting how influential this genre has become in the mainstream, movies like Skinamarink and some popular games using the tropes and elements from analog horror. Skinamarink being my favorite example of how it's been used so far, and with how polarizing that movie ended up becoming, there's at least an appreciation with how it was able to perfectly capture that sense of terror by using older technology. I've already mentioned Skinamarink before, but I just absolutely love the way it uses that TV to create that sense of dread and that whole built-up tension that the overall movie is able to create. Its ability to make you feel that perspective of a terrified child frozen in fear in the middle of the dark is truly daunting, and something that hit harder because it was done in the style of analog horror. Found footage. Found footage is such an interesting thing in internet horror since we tend to find older technology nostalgic, and since we grew up on video cameras, there are ways for the internet to find unique ways of using found footage to make something creepy and nostalgic. I think the most iconic way found footage has been used in internet horror is the very much iconic classic at this point, Marble Hornet's Slenderman tapes. Slenderman has always been interesting in how technology is used to enhance the fear around him in terms of manipulated photography and the camera in the games gaining more static as you get closer to him. Marble Hornets is a web series that utilizes found footage in order to create an engaging story around Slenderman. It starts with someone receiving tapes from an unfinished student film that explores the capabilities of Slenderman and the impact he can have on someone's psyche. Keep in mind that there are also hours and hours of this series that we're not going to get into, but all you need to know is that we can see how people deteriorate once getting stalked by Slenderman, which is perfectly represented in this format, that format being using older technology to capture something. The backrooms are another thing I've also mentioned a ton, which features endless liminal spaces, giving this existential dread as you are stuck in a forever transitional space, never being able to escape, with there also being spooky monsters and an insane amount of lore I'm just gonna ignore, mainly because we're talking about the way that found footage was used to enhance the horror of the backrooms. Now, one thing I mentioned when talking about liminal spaces and why we're so attached to them is because of the weird nostalgic feeling it can give us. One thing I mentioned about older technology is that it can give us the same exact feeling as liminal spaces, so when added together, they create the ultimate atmosphere that I can't help but be enamored with. Kane Pixel has developed this found footage series that explores the backrooms in a way that doesn't exploit it, but rather adds to the world building overall. It's such an impressive feat considering how milked the backrooms ended up getting. And the fact that he's getting an A24 movie out of it is also incredibly impressive, and I cannot wait for it to come out. Found footage works because of the way it's able to put you in this uncomfortable perspective of someone who was put in the middle of some crazy shit. It's easy for us to engage with what's going on because when someone in found footage is in danger, then we think we're in danger too, since we're literally in the perspective of the person in danger. The tension that can come from found footage can make slow build-up scenes like this work so well, especially when it comes to how a movie presents its information. A lot of show don't tell, which works perfectly for keeping us as the audience in the unknown until the character with the camera is able to grasp this situation to a point where we can kind of understand it. It's easy to resonate with someone who has no idea what's going on or is interested in watching something that's mysterious as that person knows something that we don't know as an audience, but they can't tell us because there's no reason to. There's just so much potential and fun that can be had with found footage, and the internet has definitely explored it exponentially, as we can see a lot of these elements being in analog horror. So internet horror has turned video games into something to fear, as they turn previous nostalgic games into horror experiences that people can endure, like Sonic.exe. But what I'm interested in is looking at the games that are used as a medium to scare people in the same way analog horror scares people. And there's one game that I can think of that does this perfectly and is able to use its medium as a storytelling device rather than something that you can just play. Petscop is a web series ARG where someone is recording themselves playing this kids game that resembles an adventure puzzle game from the early PlayStation era. The game seems like this unfinished demo, but the more that the character explores it, the more that they realize that this wasn't just some normal game that was left unfinished, rather something way more disturbing and personalized, like it was designed for someone in mind. This game is such a unique case because it's not something that was actually real, but the game itself was so grounded that it gave off this authentic feel, making the overall story more impactful. Especially considering we were watching someone play the game and commenting over what was happening throughout the game, even giving genuine reactions to some of the disturbing things that were happening like an actual Let's Player.
This one is Care with Eyebrows. So this is Care with Eyebrows.
Overall, the use of creating a whole nostalgic kids adventure game in order to create a horror web series is insanely creative and an amazing use of older technology to scare or creep out the audience. There are other actual games to mention while talking about how people utilize older technology to scare people, like the VHS tapes of a kids show in Amanda the Adventurer and the cameras that you have to use to watch the animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's. You know, overall, it's incredibly cool to see all the uses of old technology in horror games, but the way Petscop did it is truly next level in terms of how people can use older technology in horror games. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I just wanted to make a quick little Halloween video like I always do, going over a topic that I'm interested in. You know, nothing too crazy, but I do have another technically Halloween-ish video that's gonna come out soon. It is definitely not spooky, so that's why it wasn't very much of a big deal for me to release it during October. So whenever that comes out, that'll come out. Okay, bye!